some more sex and violence, with a helping of roller derby, outer space, and criminal trials, that means you miss Skinemax. Pick up my new book, Skinemax, a love letter to all things softcore in the 90s, over on Amazon, which is on ebook, paperback, and hardcover. I hope you enjoy.
Hello again. Welcome back to another Fresh from the Cinema review. I just got back from seeing Ready or Not 2, Here I Come. This is sort of a crazy review to be doing just because I saw and reviewed the first Ready or Not back in 2019 and I really fucking loved it. In fact, I wore this exact same shirt when I reviewed it, and so many years have passed, but I haven't seen the first one since I saw it in the cinema 7 years ago, but I remember really loving it. I dug the hell out of it. It was very funny, it was very bloody, very well made, kept me on the edge, and I remember thinking when that, and I rewatched my original review before I went to see this new one, I remember thinking, the way it ended, I didn't think there would really be much place for a sequel. Like, it was just fine the way they left it. And I didn't find out that there was going to be a sequel till maybe a few months ago. To which I was like, I didn't see that coming. And also, is a sequel really necessary? I mean, the way they ended it, I'm not sure how much further they could go with it. And also, I wrote my pre-thought notes down, as I always do. Well, there's also the thought that a lot of time has passed since the first film came out, and not saying a good sequel can't be made 7-8 years later. A good example is Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and the Death Wish franchise, Charles Bronson, really came back after it had a big 8-year gap. But a lot of time had passed, and maybe they had wanted to make this sooner, but COVID happened, and the directing duo team who did the first film, they're back. Matt Bettinelli, Olpin, and Tyler Gillette. They had a pretty big gig going on. I think they might still have it going on, where they became involved with the new Scream movies. But they're back, and not only them, but the two people that wrote the first film are back. Guy Busick and R. Christopher Murphy. And the big thing that made me decide to check this film out, like decide this is a movie worth going to the cinema for, is the fact that in the cast, like Samara Weaving, she's back obviously because she's the only cast member from the first film whose character didn't fucking die. But the big thing that made me want to check this out was the fact that in this cast is David Cronenberg. Yeah, the director of Scanners, Videodrome, The Fly. He's an actor in this, and I know Cronenberg does act occasionally, and for those who don't know, he's one of my favorite directors. Videodrome is one of my top 5 favorite films of all time. I just fucking love the guy. So I'm like, okay, you had me at Cronenberg. So went into this with the just big feelings of, is it going to be necessary? Are they going to pull this off? And now that I'm out, I have to say, I don't think this sequel was necessary. Not to say there aren't some fun parts. There's a lot of fun things in this, but in the grand scheme, I think the first film could have just worked fine on its own, stood on its own. The way it opens is just how I mentioned this in my original review. Not in these exact words, but I said, I'm not sure how things are going to go over for the character of Grace with how she was at the end of the film when the cops showed up, and sure enough, this film opens with her in the goddamn hospital, chained to the bed, being investigated by the police. I'm like, yeah, how else could this have gone down? And then, and right away, this is one of the biggest problems. We see this new character come in, played by Catherine Newton, who is Grace's sister, and it's been a long time since I've seen the first film, but I specifically remember she came from like a foster family, and she had no family, and that's why she was so eager to try and win the approval of her fiance's family. But here we find out that she apparently has a sister who she's estranged from. They both grew up in a foster family, and they haven't spoken in 5, 10, I don't remember how many years. They even mentioned at one point that she never mentioned her sister to her fiance or his family. And it's a very weak write around. That's the big thing. There's so much about this sequel, there's so much stuff in it that feels like it comes out of nowhere. Like, there was never much of a hint of this stuff, and it feels like they just obviously came up with this when they decided to make a sequel. And I've seen this done with many franchises before, and it's not god-awful in every aspect, but the sister character, Faith, played by Catherine Newton, she's really, again, very out of nowhere, and I just had a hard time wrapping my head around that part. But the big plot is that the family from the first film, who were trying to sacrifice Grace to appease Mr. LaBelle, I believe he was called, who might be the devil. And turns out that this family, again, this reeks of stuff they came up with after the first film. They are just part of a bigger group of families who are all connected to deals with LaBelle. And now that one of the families has died after failing to kill the sacrifice, they all have to come together, and it's very complicated. They all have to come together and now have to hunt the survivor, the winner of the hide-and-seek game from the first film. And it's all about fighting for power, because the main family of these groups of people that have made pacts with the devil, there's like a council, and the main family, the one with the most power, pretty much rules the planet. And this reminds me of another thing, like with this, were sequels to movies that were originally kind of simple suddenly tack on so many more fucking rules, and they make it so much more large and complex. And it becomes a lot bigger than I think the makers of the first film ever intended. It reminded me a lot of the John Wick sequels, which, while fun, just kept getting bigger and bigger to the point of fucking ridiculousness. All these families come together, and Samara Weaving, now joined by Catherine Newton, has to run for her life on this resort that's owned by the main family, the Danforths, and a lot of it is the first film again, but they do try some new ideas. It's a lot more action-based than the first movie. There are still horror elements here, but they don't really come into a big focus until the last act. So, all in all, after coming out of this movie, my main thought is, this film did not have to be made. I don't think it reached the full potential that it could have, but there was still a lot of enjoyment, and my thought is, if you wanted to get a good action ride with blood, you'll get it. But I don't know, this is not the continuation. I never wanted a continuation, but this is not the continuation of the Grace character I think I would have wanted to see. Mostly because, and as always, I list my pros and cons. So I'm going to list the cons first, just to give you an idea. And If I had to give this movie a rating, like the first film I loved, and I give it a 4 out of 5. If I had to give Ready or Not 2 a rating, it would probably be about 2.5. Like, not terrible, not the absolute worst, but not amazing either. The main thing that really holds this film back for me is the character of Faith, the sister. Not that Catherine Newton is bad. I honestly think every actor in this film does a good job, but this is a real, next to being out of nowhere, tacked on, this character is so fucking annoying. She's just never shuts up, is very grating, and her whole role is basically just bitching out her sister. I don't know how much time the actresses spent together, and I know the character is supposed to have been estranged, but there isn't much of a feeling of familial history, and her and Samara Weaving, Samara Weaving, she's great, but their scenes together are 80% of the time just sisters bickering, just arguing, and every time it happens, it just drags. Like, it just goes on and on. It took everything I had not to scream out in the theater, "I don't fucking care!" And it just never stopped, and they try to play it up like their relationship is reforming, and that it's supposed to be something you're supposed to feel emotional about, but honestly, I just couldn't care. I didn't give a damn if she lived, the sister lived or died, and I think the film would have been so much better if it was just Samara Weaving standing alone once again, and maybe they weren't trying to copy the first film exactly, but this was not the character I would have wanted to see her teamed up with. And this is a small one, but it is worth noting. In the opening of the film, before Grace and Faith are, yeah, they make a joke about how their names are all religious-y, but there's a bit in the beginning where she tells her sister what happened, and it is just an exposition dump where she recaps the first plot of the film, and I get the feeling this was put in just to possibly catch up some motherfucker who may have gone into this without seeing the first film, which I'm not a big fan of that stuff. It just, because for those of us that did see the first film, it just feels unnecessary and takes up time, and that's another thing. The first movie was an hour and a half. This movie is almost an hour and 50 minutes, and I don't mind long movies, but there are several parts throughout, and you're probably going to hear me say this again, but there are several parts where it feels like they're going slow, they're dragging it out unnecessary, that more than they have to. And while the first film had a real intense adrenaline energy, this film, at times, especially near the end, the character of Grace, who's becoming used to all this crazy satanic shit, begins to develop a nonchalant attitude, which could have worked, but the way she talks, it reminded me a little bit of the nonchalant delivery that you'd see in something like Osgood Perkins' The Monkey, a movie that, despite what the majority thought, I just couldn't get into. So, yeah, it began to feel a little just like it had a lack of passion behind it. And probably the second biggest con I have after the sister character is the fact that they give David Cronenberg a pretty high billing in this film. And how long is he actually in the movie? 3 minutes. He's only in the goddamn film for one scene that barely amounts to maybe 3-4 minutes of screen time. And he does alright, but he's not in it that much. And his character does play a big part in the majority of the film's plot, but he's only in it for 3 minutes. It's very brief, and it's just a cameo pretty much. And I'm wondering, why get him, and why give him such big billing if he's gonna be in it only that long? I mean, that was the main draw that brought me in, and I don't mind him having a cameo, but it just feels like you suckered us in a little by giving him such prominence. Like, he's one of the top billed fucking actors for this movie, and he's only there for, I don't know, less than a inch's worth. Okay, now my little rant is over. Time for the pros, because there actually are quite a few here. Enough that makes me think that there is a lot in this that makes it worth seeing. Not sure I'll ever rewatch it again, but there were some very well done stuff. Like, the main thing obviously is the blood and carnage, the effects. It does not do a copy-paste of the carnage from the first film. They get some pretty inventive shit in here. As like I said, this is majority an action film. The action is pretty damn fucking solid, and a lot of it is owed to just the good style. The performances of the supporting actors, like, I think the best thing in this are the supporting characters. There's a lot of really funny characters who get legit laughs. We see all these different types of evil and cowardly devil worshippers. David Cronenberg's character, his kids are the main baddies going after Grace, and they are Ursula Danforth, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. Yeah, fucking Buffy, fucking Daphne is one of the villains in this. And her character's twin brother, Titus Danforth, played by Sean Hattasey. These two were really good. I wish Sarah Michelle Gellar had been given a little more screen time, but she did a very good job. There's a part at the end where they kind of try to give her something of a redemption moment, which I wasn't that fond of. It felt a little out of character, and I felt like having her go full evil would have been much better, but she still does a good job, and she and Sean Hattasey work well off each other, but Sean Hattasey, he is a surprising standout here. If there's anybody, like, because everybody here is a bad guy, but if there's anyone who could really stand out as the ultimate bad guy, it's him. He plays just a wretched, obnoxious, and just brutal bastard, and he has probably the most brutal scene in the film, outside of, like, non-death brutal scene, where he just pounds the ever-loving shit out of Faith, the sister. Meanwhile, Grace is having a very creative and hilarious fight with one of the kids of the rival families, who we find out was actually the ex-fiance of her husband from the first film's family, which, again, out of nowhere. But anyway, they have a great fight that opens with her wearing the wedding dress that she wanted to wear when she wanted to marry Alex from the first film. So we have her in this bright white dress, and Samara Weaving still wearing the bloodied up dress from the first film, and the other girl, she comes in and she says, "Hi, cunt," holds up a fucking rocket launcher and is like, "Bye, cunt." that was fucking hilarious. And when she fires, it turns out she's holding it backwards, just like in Commando. It goes back, blows up the ship behind her, and then she and Samara Weaving have a fight where they end up pepper spraying each other, leading to the two of them fighting each other blind. And during this blind fight, one of them crashes into a DJ table, causing the song Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler to start playing. And this is my favorite scene in the film. It's creative and funny, and it just goes in tune well with this awesome classic song. The blood, it's hard to say how much is practical, but they made good use of it, and eventually, again, the characters have a nonchalant attitude after a while, but it's still very fun to see all this shit happen. Just like the first film, we see bodies combust. And before I move on to my spoiler talk, the last big positive pro to give Ready or Not 2 is another cast member who is a nice addition because he has been really doing a lot of horror films the past few years. Elijah Wood, playing a character simply known as the Lawyer. And at first I was wondering, is he gonna be a demon? Is he gonna be LaBelle, the devil? But no, he's the literal lawyer for the devil, and he's the guy who goes in between LaBelle and the families, telling them how the rules work, although even he, and I'm not even gonna bother explaining the rules that lead to this whole fucking game, because even Elijah Wood's character admits it's very complicated, but he turns out to be a surprising, positive part of the film, despite his evil association, and his last moment is pretty cool, and yeah, I just liked it. Like, after Lord of the Rings, it's like he just was like, fuck it, and went full on into horror. Like, this was what he was destined to do, instead of wandering around New Zealand with a bunch of fake midgets. So yeah, those are my non-spoiler thoughts on Ready or Not 2, Here I Come. Not a necessary sequel as far as I'm concerned, but if you want action, gore, and a couple of fun supporting characters, I think you'll get it. I don't know how you'll take to the sister character, but you never know. And if you've seen it and just want to hear my thoughts on the ending, stick around. If not, go check it out and come back afterwards. The ending of this film goes a route that I didn't see coming, and it does tie into something that was established earlier. Again, very complicated, much bigger than the simple ride of the first film, but it's discovered that if she, Grace, marries a male member of one of the families in this council, then she will live, and whoever she marries will become the new leader of the council. Like, their family will come out on top. Again, it was hard to follow, and to explain it would take about 5 extra minutes, but she says she will marry Titus to spare her sister from getting killed, and before the wedding, she is approached by Ursula, who tries to show that she's not as bad as the others. Tries to tell her that Titus is someone who she needs to control because he is pure evil. And then all of a sudden, he shows up and get a well done, surprising moment where he just kills his sister. Like, we see Sarah Michelle Gellar just get her fucking neck snapped. It was a well done intense scene, and I can't really say I'm sad for her because up to this point she had been pretty bad, but yeah, I'm mixed on her trying to have a somewhat of a redemption moment, but regardless, it is a surprisingly dark, more serious moment than we're used to seeing in these movies. And then we get a black dress, black suit, satanic wedding, which I admit, this climax goes on, this is why the movie is an hour 50 instead of an hour 30. They are going on way much longer than they should. However, I do feel it leads to a pretty fun conclusion where after they've married and signed their names in blood, making the pact, out of nowhere, Grace just murders Titus and takes the ring that the leader of the main family on the council wears. And a lot of stuff that even Elijah Wood says it doesn't make a lot of sense. She renounces her claim over the council, and again, I couldn't fucking explain this to save my life. It said that if no one has the ring in their possession by dawn, which is 3 minutes away, then everything comes crashing down. And we get this wonderfully shot scene of her throwing the ring into a pit, and all the families jumping in, having a fight to the death in the pit. And sure enough, dawn comes, no one has the ring, and we get a big kaboom moment of these 20, 30 people just all exploding at the same time. One guy thinks he survived and he's like, "Let's party!" and then he blows up. It's not as fun as the first film's ending, where you legit didn't know how it was gonna go until they finally started blowing up. But they had blood and they decided we're gonna use it. Elijah Wood gives a pretty awesome nod of respect. And then the two sisters walk off, continuing to yap with each other. And again, I'm like, I really could care less if they're on good terms. The only thing I'm curious about as they walk off into the sunset is, are they going to make another one of these in 8 years? I didn't bring this up before, but this whole movie takes place immediately after the events of the first film. And while Samara Weaving still looks pretty good after 7 years, I could buy that this is her character from 7 years ago. Are they gonna do another one of these? And they even make a joke, how many people are you gonna marry in 1 week? And I'm like, just let it end. I know I probably sound like I'm complaining too much, but by this point, I'm just a little bit tired. I would have been more than happy with only the first film, and now that it's over, I'm not sure there's really much more they could do. I don't think they did what they could have done to their full potential with this sequel, but it was interesting to watch, and I don't 100% regret seeing it. I just wish it had a little better main characters, and if you liked it, if you really got into it, then maybe leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. If you hate it even more than me, again, leave a comment, and hope you enjoyed this review. I know it probably seemed a little off. As always, I film these when I'm at a very tired stage of the day, so I'm gonna go recharge, get this put together, and I've got some big videos coming up, both this channel and my Movie Buff Reactions channel soon, so stay tuned for those, and thanks for watching. I will see you again, hopefully soon.